Hi, everyone. My name is Renee Staten, and I'm in the Pinehurst neighborhood. I've been working as part of the 130th Street Station group for about 6 years. And we have about 46 people who registered for the event. I'm seeing that people are joining right now. So I'm just going to wait until we get to just a couple more people. I wanted to really welcome everybody to the webinar. And if you have anybody, any in your community or friends that were interested in this topic and weren't able to join it, this is the first time I've ever done this. It's a webinar, but we're recording it to put up on the Pinehurst Facebook group, the 130th Facebook group, and then hopefully, I think also we'll try to put it on YouTube as well so people can share it amongst each other. And I wanted to really also say tonight we have Taylor Carroll from Sound Transit and Patrice Carroll from the City of Seattle Department of OPCD, who are going to be presenting. And what's really, so 130th Street Station, we started having the discussion about this in early 2015. The community came together, and I think many people who are joining, listening in tonight, were part of an effort to ask Sound Transit to open a station at 130th Street. Before that time, Sound Transit had planned to go straight from Northgate to 145th. And what was really amazing is all of this community ask resulted in Sound Transit agreeing to build a station at 130th. And the timeline of that has changed a lot over the years. Yeah, I think originally, and Taylor can correct me, I think it started at like maybe 2037, and then maybe it was 2031. Different years have been talked about. And right before the pandemic started, we had there was a huge ask on the part of the community and Councilmember Juarez to open the station in 2024. And Sound Transit agreed, the Sound Transit board agreed that they would do that. And well, they didn't get to a final conclusion of it, but it was looking very favorable that that would happen. There's going to be a discussion in 2021, an analysis of the station. And then immediately after this discussion happened, the pandemic happened. And for a while, and I think people who've been following the discussion in the community, it looked like the station might not happen. It might not happen until 2037, 2031. It was not looking great. And I'm just going to stop there and let Taylor talk a little bit about what's happened now at Sound Transit, talk about some of the plan for the station design, and what the next steps are with Sound Transit. Taylor, thank you.
Yeah, Renee, thanks for kicking us off here. I was chuckling just a little bit when you were introducing me and Patrice. I just realized that we have the same last name, and I'm guessing several of you have questions whether we're related or not. And the answer to that is no, we are not.
Well, maybe somewhere.
Well, that's true. Maybe we are, but as far as we know, we are not. But anyways, yeah, I am happy to represent Sound Transit here. I'm a senior project manager in the North Corridor, meaning working on all of the expansion work from basically Northgate extension on northward. So working on this project, on the Linwood Link extension, and then at some point I will be working on the Everett Link extension. So I have a presentation here to go through some materials. Before I start, I actually have one question to Renee on this. Renee, you introduced me in talking about this with the focus, I believe, mostly on the 130th station. But I believe I have a couple slides that are about the Shoreline South 148th station. Do you want just to skip over that stuff and just go straight into the 130th stuff, or do you want me to hit on some of the Shoreline South station work as well?
That's a great question, and I think it's great if you could talk about that as well, because it really plays into the work that Patrice is doing as well, and many people who are on the call live near that station.
Okay.
And I also just wanted to say, to make sure people know, and I put this in the chat, if people have questions, if they want to put their questions in the chat, I'm going to keep track of them and share them with Taylor and Patrice after they're done with their presentations. And they'll be able to, we have about 15 minutes to go through questions at the end.
Okay, great. So let's see here. I just shared my screen. Can I get a thumbs up? The only person I can see right now is Patrice. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen, Taylor.
Okay. Okay, great. And then I'm going to go into presentation mode. So hopefully you can still see that. Okay. I've already done the introduction, so I'll skip right through here. So at the start here, I just wanted to outline a little bit of take a step back and take a look at the big picture of what Sound Transit is doing. We have several different extensions that we're working on right now. And in what we like to say is over the next couple of years, we're going to be more than doubling our system across 5 different extensions that we're working on. So namely those extensions, the University of Washington out to Northgate, which just opened for service just last weekend. So we were excited to announce that. And then in 2024, of course, Northgate to Linwood. So keep moving on north. And that's where the bulk of today's conversation is going to be. And then a couple of other extensions, as you see here, downtown Seattle to Overlake, Ingle Lake to Federal Way, and then an extension down into Tacoma. So pretty exciting work over the next couple of years that several stations will be opening up. So diving into the Linwood Link extension, it's an 8.5 mile extension extending from Northgate north up to the Linwood City Center. So it goes through 4 different cities. So through the remainder of Seattle, all the way through the city of Shoreline and into Mount Lake Terrace, and then all the way into Linwood. And this extension consists of 4 different stations. But with the Northeast 130th station, because it's an infill station, we have an opportunity here to add it to the Linwood Link extension. And I'll get into those details in just a bit. So I have a couple slides here that dive into the Shoreline South 148th station. I recognize some of you may know this as the 145th station. And yes, the name of it has changed to the 148th. It's a more accurate description of where the station is actually now located. At this location, it's on the site of the former North Jackson Park and Ride. As you see here, we have this great aerial view of a rendering. And this station is a pretty large station that has bus turnarounds located within the station footprint, as well as a over 500 stall parking garage. And then it's an elevated station serving that community in this area. A few other slides just to show some renderings of what the finished station will look like. Here's a view from the north entry. Here's a closer up view of the south entry with ticket kiosk, escalators going up. Up on the platform, the view looking south. So you can see the garage in the distance there. And then here's a view of the station garage, which will serve patrons getting to and from the station that are coming from a little bit farther who are driving to the station. All right, now the topic we've been waiting for, the Northeast 130th infill station. As Renee mentioned, there's been a lot of history around the Northeast 130th infill station. It all came to fruition with the passage of the 2016 ST3 voter package. In that voter package, we had a timeline of starting the work on the station in 2024 with an opening date of 2031. However, over the past couple of years, we've had the realization that working on an infill station during an active line creates difficulties with construction. And so we started looking at accelerating the timeline of the project. And so over the years, we've accelerated the design. And this all culminated with the latest discussions at the board with the realignment in August of just this year. And they've decided to have a starting date of 2025 for this station. Hopefully you all know where it's located. It's in North Seattle at the corner of 5th Avenue Northeast and Northeast 130th. A few details of the station is a elevated side platform station. The majority of stations that Sound Transit builds are all center platform stations. However, as an infill station, this has to be a side platform station because the guideway is already built. And so therefore, in order to add the station, the platforms have to be on the side of the guideway. Estimated 3,400 daily boardings. And you can see some travel times here to popular destinations like downtown Seattle and to the airport. So just outlining some of the reasons why we were looking at accelerating, why it just makes sense to accelerate the timeline of the station. If we were to be constructing the station along active rail, we've estimated that it could be up to 61,000 daily riders are disrupted. Most of those riders being from north of the area coming south into the Seattle metropolitan area. In order to accommodate this impact, we would have to use some single tracking, which would cause delays. And then those delays could have a ripple effect throughout our entire system. And then it just makes it more difficult to construct the station if we were to construct during active rail. And of course, if there were a pause between when we built Linwood Link and when we built the station on the original timeline, that would have multiple impacts to the neighborhood, as well as some extra costs. So we're pretty happy to accelerate the timeline here. And here's a pretty big picture overlook of the schedule for the 130th station as it overlays with Linwood Link extension. So just orienting you to this graphic, Linwood Link extension, we are in construction right now. It has a planned opening date of mid-2024. And then the 130th station, it's broken up into a couple of different packages. So one package is already in construction right now, and that is slated to end or be completed pretty soon by the beginning of next year. And then what's in front of us is a decision by the board to authorize us to go into construction and to release the budget to enter into construction. So a few important dates that I'll go over again at the end of the presentation are next week on October 14th, we are going to take the project to the board for releasing of some funds for some early procurement items. But the biggest board decision is going to be for the project to enter into construction. We do not have a date yet, but it's targeted for Q1 of, I'm sorry, there's a typo there. It says 2021, but that's supposed to be 2022. And then I like to use this graphic as an illustration of why we're trying to accelerate the construction of the station, why it just makes sense. Train testing is going to begin in 2023. And as soon as train testing begins, it makes construction along that active rail line a lot more difficult. All right, getting into some more details on the Northeast 130th and what we're looking to do for the neighborhood and providing access. I first want to orient you to this graphic. I recognize there's lots of information here and then the print is really small. So first and foremost, the north arrow is to the right, so that means south is to the left here. And then we have I-5 on the west side. So In general, we have two access points, main access points to the station, one on the south side here and then one on the north side. And so the idea is that when people come and get dropped off via bus at these two bus stop locations, the majority of folks are going to be entering the station on the south side. So you have some south side stairs located right there, and then escalators right here, and then two elevators sitting across from each other right in this location. Another drop-off point and access to the station is a car drop-off area. So cars would come up north, come up Fifth Avenue, and then get into the drop-off area and then access the station on the north end. So we have stairs here and elevators located right here. And then just pointing out a couple of key features, bike parking on the north side, as well as bike parking and lockers on the south side. We would be doing some infrastructure improvements to make sure that we're providing safe access to patrons. So building out the curb in this area, adding some sidewalk, and then making some intersection improvements. As you all know, just to the south of here is the 130th off-ramp off of I-5. And so there's some channelization improvements to improve traffic flow through that area. All right, need to give the computer a minute to think. All right, here we go. So now that you're a little bit familiar with the layout of the site, I'm providing information here about site access. And once again, I know that this is a little bit hard to read here, but hopefully I can orient you to these different lines. So these different lines represent where and how people are, where from and how people are going to be accessing the station. And this is our guidance on how we're thinking about making improvements to or designing the station for how people are getting there, but then also the improvements that surround the area and how people can get to the station safely. So as I mentioned before, we have public transit, which would be buses from King County Metro. So these are the blue lines that folks will be dropped off at these two locations and then cross 130th right here to the station, and then here across Fifth Avenue and get to the station on the south. Pedestrians would be coming from multiple areas. On the west side, all of the community on the west side crossing the bridge, accessing the station. From the east side, from the neighborhood areas. And there's the Jackson Park and golf course right in this area, and there is a community trail. And so folks might be using that community trail to get access to the station. The green line represents bicyclists coming up and down and from north and south, and then from east and west. And then of course, vehicles. We are encouraging vehicles via the design of our station to come and utilize this drop-off area. And there is no parking associated with this station. Giving the computer a minute. All right, here we go. So just like at the Shoreline station, I have a couple renderings that give a better illustration of what the station would look like. We're still working on the design. The design definitely is not finished. And I'll go over a couple of public opportunities for the public to weigh in on our design in the future. But this is a view from that south entrance where the majority of folks would be entering the station. So as you can see, people coming across Fifth Avenue here or coming across 130th, and then entering the station. You have side platforms, so you have vertical circulation on both sides to get up to the platform level. So what you see here are mostly the stairs and then stair infrastructure. Once you're in the lobby area, this is looking at that same south entrance, but just from the north, looking south. Once you're in the lobby area, you would come through that area from the last one, pay at the ticket kiosk, and then access the stairs in these locations, whether you're going south or whether you're heading north. The design team is working on what the finishes are going to look like. Finishes being underneath of that platform area, on the ground here, and key elements to finishing that design is thinking about how do we encourage people to understand where to get where they want to go from where they are currently located. So it's all about wayfinding and where they're going and how they get there. And then, of course, if you're familiar with our stations, and I just did a tour of the Northgate extension, I always enjoy looking at the art and what the artists come up with as part of any station build. We have a 1% for the art budget, and that applies to this project as well. And so what we go through is we go through an art process where the artists will come up with themes for the station and then work with us on the locations that they would like to use. And we try and do the best to allow for artist discretion to for them to use their artistic abilities and express art in a variety of ways. Another view, if you remember the paratransit drop-off area, this is kind of right at the mid station from Fifth Avenue. We have another identified possible art location. As you can see, some graphical representation of what it might look like underneath the station. Vegetation, of course, meeting the Seattle design standards on what vegetation would look like in the area. I believe I just have one or two. I think this might be, yeah, this is my last slide on what it would look like. This is what it would look like from the bridge crossing over I-5. So as you can see on this side, the vertical circulation coming up, these are the stairs. You have the elevators coming up here and then escalator located right here. And this would be a similar view as if you were driving from driving along I-5. So public engagement to date, we've conducted a couple different open houses and some planning workshops. Also, an opportunity for the public to weigh in is to come to attend the Seattle Design Commission meetings. So we've held a meeting at the Seattle Design Commission in April 2020. We've also partnered with the city to do some business community outreach. As you can see, those dates in late 2020. The latest open house that we conducted was a little less than a year ago, or almost exactly a year ago. And then we have another presentation to the Seattle Design Commission that we did in May. And then, as I mentioned, we've gone to the board a couple times, and the board has heard your voices on making a decision to accelerate the timeline of the station. And that was done here at the August 5th realignment discussion. And then, oh, once again, here's another typo, that October 14, 2021, it's, or sorry, that's not a typo. I did get it right in Q1 of 2022. So the next date for the SD board is next week, next Thursday. We are taking the project to the System Expansion Committee and to vote on the project, authorizing some funds to continue to accelerate the project. And then once we enter construction, after this board conversation, we will conduct an online open house and outline all of the road closures, the timing of those closures, how long everyone can expect construction to take, and just key information about what we plan to do during construction. And then this is pretty much my last slide here. Some information if you want to pay more, have subscribed to some alerts, as well as if you have follow-up conversations, you can reach out to our community outreach staff. And then if there's any concerns about anything, we also have a 24-hour hotline that can be called. And so that's the end of my presentation. I'll leave this slide up so people can copy this information if needed.
And I can put this, this will be recorded, and then I can share this information with the community, with everyone who attended. I can share that information afterward.
Great.
Are these slides that you could share?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Oh, I'm sorry. The slides that you've just done, would you be able to send them in electronically that I could share them with people?
Yeah, I could provide this to you.
Okay, thank you. And Patrice. Taylor, thank you so much. It's really exciting to see what the station's going to look like.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you guys are interested.
And Patrice,
Yes,
are you? Thank you.
here we are. So is everyone seeing those slides?
Absolutely.
Great. So I did peruse the participant list, and there were many familiar names. So so I know a lot of you have been with this project from the beginning, from that first open house that we had back in 2018. So thank you for hanging in there. Oh, is this not? There we go. But for those of you who are perhaps joining new, just a quick reminder that this station area plan is not just about 130th. We do have another light rail station in Shoreline that many people who live in this neighborhood will use. And we also wanted to look at a station area around the BRT station, which will be at 145th and 15th Avenue. And that project is also moving forward and is expected to open, to begin service in 2026. So we're very much interested in looking at some of the land uses around that BRT station as well. Our schedule has lagged a little bit, but we are we issued our draft station area plan last March, and we're going to finalize that by the end of the year. And now that Sound Transit has gone through its realignment process, and we have a much better idea of when the 130th Street station is going to open, we are preparing to move forward to our next phase of work, which will begin in 2022. And that will be a zoning study, an EIS, the legislation, also coordinating with our other departments around what capital planning projects and transportation access projects might happen in the area. But we've come a long way from that, from way back when that decision was made to add back in this station into the ST3 package. So, so things are going to start moving really much more quickly. Again, I'm not going to go through the draft plan, but we do still have the information. We haven't finalized the plan. If anyone has any last minute ideas or suggestions, you can still, it's not too late. So I invite you, if you haven't spent any time with the plan, to go to our website, review the video, look at the document, and also the frequently asked questions that have been coming up as various people have been reviewing the plan and sharing their thoughts about it. But in general, these are the major sections of the plan. We have a vision statement, which is a really short statement that sort of expresses what that station might look like, what that station area might look like in 20 years, what we would like it to look like. And then we have a series of goals and policies that are kind of grouped into these clusters. How we live deals with land use, housing, urban design, livability, natural environment. How we move around has some high-level policies around how we are going to approach station access and neighborhood mobility, parking, where change could happen first. What do we expect in terms of where some of the early development opportunities are. And then we also look at what are the programs and our goals and what strategies that we can do to make the change that's coming to this area to make it equitable. And that includes affordable housing, some of the work that we're doing to reduce displacement and also provide greater access to opportunity. So all in all, we have 13 goals, we have 68 strategies, and then we've also identified some things that are either being worked on or like almost are in the works or are going to happen very soon that we call our early actions. We've also included a lot of information in this plan that we think will be of interest to you because it addresses some of the programs that we have now that could be deployed in this area. And these highlights are based on things that we heard from you over the last 2 years through our community engagement. So an example here is we've highlighted some of the changes in policy that the city's recently adopted to make it easier to develop daycare in residential areas. So there's a little highlight about that. So we know that that's a policy that will make it easier to have daycare near this station. And again, some other programs that you may know about or some other work that going on in this area that you may or may not know about. I'm not going to talk a lot about. I think Renee is organizing another session to talk more specifically about the work that SDOT did. But when we plan land use, we can't plan land use without also planning transportation, and particularly in this area, how people will walk, bike, and use transit to get to this new light rail station. So we work very closely with our colleagues at the Seattle Department of Transportation. They did a multimodal access study. They issued their final report of that study in December 2020. And they identified a number of near-term and long-term improvements and prioritized them. And so there are 18 proposed projects that they are going to be studying in further detail, doing some preliminary design. And I'm sure that they can give you all the updates of what's happening with those projects. Hopefully you'll see a lot of them in our next transportation levy, which is how a lot of those projects might get funded. But yeah, so SDOT will be by to talk to you about the multimodal access study. This is just a snapshot of the latest cycle of community engagement that we did after we released our draft plan. It's by no means the only community engagement that we did through this process. Again, we started, a couple of years ago in an open house. We had a workshop. And again, our goal is to always sort of have an online opportunity for people to participate who can't come to a live event. But then once the pandemic hit, then we pretty much had to shift to all online. So some of you might have participated in our community conversations in the summer of 2020. And then most recently, we had kind of an on-demand online open house to walk people through the draft plan and solicit some feedback about that. We also, Renee also organized a question and answer period in the spring that we had about 20 people who joined us for that. We also did some direct mailing. We're going back to some of the old technology during this pandemic as well, and relying on postcards and mailings. And so about 300 households got a little summary pamphlet about the draft plan. And then we've been available, and some communities like yours have organized events and invited us to come and talk about the draft plan. Councilmember Juarez has also helped us to get the word out. And then we just have our own city media websites and emails. We do have a specific list for this project. So if you haven't signed up for that, please go to our website and sign up so that you'll get all the future notifications about that. So again, here is the vision statement that came out of our 1.5 and 2 years of discussions with you. And we actually asked people in the survey how many people, what people thought about this, and it got out of I would say 3/4 of the people had a very positive reaction to this vision statement. So I think that was a pretty good outcome for us, that I think we kind of hit the major points that people wanted us to hit in that vision statement. So the goals and strategies this becomes our North Star. So all of our goals and strategies are really actions that can help us achieve this vision. Within the plan, I'm just going to point out a couple of things that were in the plan. And one of them is an early action that was recommended. And it was, we were considering taking some action on just the one block right across the street from the station. So you see that in this map. And we were trying to figure out if we could do a rezone or kind of what kind of early action. And why were we doing this? And we really wanted to do something during this very important time when the elected officials were weighing the future and the construction schedules for these projects. And we very much wanted this project to come out of that process in a good place. And so we thought even this minor action would kind of put something on the books that we are really committed to, and we are really serious about transit-oriented development around this station. And so I think maybe some of it worked, because we know the outcome was that the station was accelerated. So that was very good news. And council did approve this what we proposed was a future land use map amendment. So not new zoning, but something that says, gee, we need to have, it's kind of a trigger for, we need to have some new zoning in this location, because right now our zoning and our future land use map are inconsistent. This future land use map now says that we should have mixed use along Fifth Avenue, right across from the station, and some multifamily residential on the rest of that block. And currently the zoning for this block right now is all neighborhood residential, which is the lowest density zoning that we have. So that was something that we were able to do in a very short period of time. We didn't really have enough time to do a bigger area, but it is certainly our intent to follow up with some specific zoning and some additional future land use map amendments and zoning for the entire station area over the next 2 years. I just want to reconfirm that there was a lot of talk from the very beginning of this project about the Jackson Park Golf Course, and many people had many ideas about what should happen in the future at the golf course. And so I just want to reconfirm that this is a major policy question for the city, and one that we are not able to answer as part of this station area planning effort. So although we have in the plan that we think there's opportunities, Park seems to be open to other opportunities about expanding some of the uses at Jackson Park, and the snowstorm we had in 2021 was an opportunity to have different uses at that park, but there may be others even when we don't have snow. So that's about as far as we went with recommendations about the Jackson Park Golf Course. In the future, at some point, the city may decide that it wants to change its policy about parkland and golf courses as part of our municipal park system. But we don't anticipate that that's going to happen before we bring forward any zoning. So our next steps, our goal is to finalize the draft plan by the end of this year. So we are reviewing your comments. We're also getting a lot of internal comments from other departments and other agencies. We're going to make those changes and we're going to issue a final plan. We did already implement the future land use change for that one block. We're also working to identify resources to carry us through the next phase of work. So we are hoping to have a more specific timeline that will be included in the final plan. And then we're, throughout 2021, again, we've been following the Sound Transit process, and we've been providing information to guide some of the decisions and some of the discussions that our elected officials been having. And that's going to continue, not just with the Linwood Link, but also with the 145th BRT project. So we're following both of those projects and collaborating with our colleagues at Sound Transit. In 2022, we are going to really re-engage with the community, because we're going to have some very detailed technical work going on, and we want to bring you into that work and get your input. We're going to be talking a lot about specific zoning, not so much the zoning categories that we've been talking up till now. We also have to do some environmental studies. There are some key issues here that we think require us to do a full, what we call an environmental impact statement. We know that there's natural resources, there's water issues, there's air and noise from I-5. So, and again, there will be a significant change in the neighborhood context, higher density, bulkier buildings. So those are some of the areas that we think are going to be key to our environmental studies. And then we will bring forward a zoning proposal eventually coming out of that process. And that will go through our legislative process, which never goes quite as quickly as we hope. So again, we're looking to adopt new zoning in 2023 or 2024. That's when we anticipate, if we can be very efficient and move things along. It could be as early as 2023. But if we kind of get tangled up in some sticky issues, it might take us a little longer, and then we're probably looking at 2024. And again, we're still continuing to talk to our other colleagues about other projects going on in this area and how those might affect the plan. And all of the other implementation strategies that we have listed in the draft plan are things that we're going to continue to move forward with, not just zoning, but all of the other strategies about affordable housing and livability and parking. And so lots more work to do. And you guys are obviously have your work to do as well. I like to say that making this vision a reality, a lot of the work falls to us, but the community obviously plays a role as well. And you're already playing a role. These sessions are helping you to get ready to engage in this next phase of work. And it's also, the city has so many new programs in terms of investing in community projects. And so it's not too early for you as a community to think about how you can take advantage of some of those other resources and what kind of projects you might want to lead that support the station, or will that improve the quality of life in the station area in the future. So that's all I have. Thank you for sticking with us, and more to come. I hope you have the stamina to stay with this project through the next 2 years. And as I said, you can always, if you're new to this process, spend a little time on the website, read all the materials and all the feedback that your neighbors have given us so far, and yeah, stay involved. Thank you.
Patrice, thank you so much for that. And I love those pictures at the end. They made me so happy to see.
Let's look at them again.
I love them. And I also this is great. Taylor and Patrice, are you okay to answer some questions?
Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So I've gone through, and just to let everybody know, I've kept track of all the questions that have come up in the chat. And Patrice, thank you for pointing out the piece where this is hopefully the first of a series of webcasts that we'll have. And in one of the subsequent ones, I'm reaching out to SDOT. There has been a transportation plan, and you guys will correct, it has a proper name, that talks about the access of the station, the walking and biking and other ways that people will get to the station, and particular projects that SDOT is thinking about. And so we're hoping to invite them to come and present and to be able to answer questions in a future webcast. And I'm keeping track. So there were some questions around bike lanes and Jackson Park Trail. I just want to let you know that I recognize those questions, and I'm going to share them with SDOT, and we will hopefully have those answered in a subsequent session, just because I think that's the better group to answer those questions. And I'm just going
Yeah,
to.
and I could say that people, if you're interested in that topic and you haven't read SDOT's multimodal study, go to that document. It has so much great information in it. You can find a link to it from our website, from the 130th, 145th station area planning website.
Thank you for that, Patrice.
I can put a link to that in the chat.
That would be amazing.
Okay.
And so I wanted to, there are questions that we've been hearing over the past year. People have been writing in on Facebook, have been posting on Facebook, and I wanted to just bring some of those up first. The biggest question, Patrice, that people are asking is when will change occur? And there's two parts to that. One is people are asking for this future land use map change the council just passed. What will that change and when will it change? And then this larger discussion, what will that change and when will that change things?
So the change that was done for one block, that's called it's a future land use map amendment in our comprehensive plan. So it doesn't change the underlying zoning. So if somebody now wants to, let's say we change the future land use map to say we in the future, we'd like to see mixed use development on Fifth Avenue. If somebody wants to build a mixed use project on that parcel, they still have to get a zoning change. So the zoning has not been changed. So I think that most people are going to wait until we change the zoning, because that's a lot easier than them trying to change the zoning on an individual parcel. It's expensive, it's time consuming. That action actually goes to council. It's what we call a contract rezone. And it just requires the proponent to do a lot more work. So I think that most people will wait until we have the new zoning in place. So they'll probably, and especially now, if we, now that there's like more clarity about the timeline for when things are going to happen, and if we can get new zoning in place by 2024, I think people will just wait.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrice. That's the biggest question.
Yeah.
So
in some ways it was kind of a symbolic gesture. And it was also an action that compels us to follow through and have new zoning on that site, because now, as I said, our comprehensive plan is inconsistent with our zoning, and that's not a situation that we should be in. So we have to be actively working to make those consistent.
Perfect. Thank you. And there was a questions that came in before the session tonight, which was west of I-5. When would those zoning changes take place? Do you expect zoning changes at the station area, and then in other parts? When we look at your map, we see a number of areas that you've identified as possible areas for zoning changes. Do you see those zoning changes occurring at the same time, or do you see that as being a phased process where they may take place at different times in different areas of that map?
It's our intention now that we would bring forward all of those zoning changes together at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Taylor, can I ask you a couple questions about the station that came up during your presentation?
Yeah, great.
Can you tell a little bit more about what a side platform station looks like and how is it different from other types of stations?
Yeah, sure. It might be best to just bring up a graphic. Let me see if I can find something that's representative of a side platform station. But as I'm looking for it, I'll start talking here. The general concept is that a side platform station is where the guideway runs down the middle, which is where the trains run. And then, so for people to get onto the trains, the platforms lie on the side of that guideway that runs through the middle. And so people go up and down the stairs and escalators or elevators, get to those platforms, and then they access the trains, which are running in between the two platforms. And as I mentioned in my presentation, Sound Transit likes to actually build center platform stations because they're a little bit more efficient for people to get where they want to go, especially if they are going the wrong direction and all of a sudden you get off of the northbound and jump on the southbound. You just walk across that center platform. But with our infill stations, we don't have that ability because the stations are being built after, namely it's being infill, so it's being built after the guideway is already built. And yes, we are accelerating the timeline of this station. However, it was too late to change the design of the Linwood Links guideway to accommodate a center platform station. And so therefore we have a side platform station. And it's going to be the same thing for other two infill stations at Graham and down at Boeing Access Road. And I think the best representation, if it helps, I can share my screen once again, is just right here. As you see, the train is going on your guideway, and then this platform is located on the outside of where the trains run. So a center platform station, you would see the trains on the outside, and then the station runs down the middle of where the trains are going. So I think this represents that side platform station best.
Perfect. Thank you. I can't tell you how many times I would get on the wrong train and going in the wrong direction. And it is so nice that you can just get off and then go down the other side, but that makes a lot of sense in terms of construction. Thank you for explaining that.
Sure.
Oh, there's another question. So is there a reason why there have to be vertical walls that enclose the elevators and stairs? It seems like it doesn't seem safe with limited visibility and doesn't allow for direct pedestrian flow.
Yeah, great question. Getting into design and what our finishes act and look like. So there's several things that when we're designing a station that we're trying to balance. So living in the Northwest, being a wet location, we want to make sure that our customers are protected from the elements. One of the best ways to do that is to provide glazing, what we call glazing on the sides. And so providing enclosures around the stairs does that. And so it helps with wind protection, it helps with rain protection, keeping people out of those elements. But that is in balance with safety of making sure that people, we don't have areas where there's blind spots where people can hide and lurk in the shadows. And that's what's called a SEPTED issue. So that's something where you design for crime prevention through environmental design. So that's the acronym for SEPTED. And if you look at our renderings where we have those enclosed walls, all of those enclosures are see-through. And that even goes for our elevators. We make all of our elevators where you can see in and you can see out. And the concept here is if some illicit behavior were to go on in any of these areas, the pedestrians, the public that are nearby would see this activity going on. And so that's something that we're also concerned about as well. And then third, it's just a matter of safety and security and management of our sites. So that's the third item that we're balancing, is thinking about trash, where trash goes, if the wind blows and blowing trash around in areas, trying to keep it out of areas that are difficult to clean up. And so enclosed structures kind of help with that. So it's those three things that are all working together that we're trying to balance.
Perfect. Thank you. And the person who asked the question says, thank you a lot. It was a very helpful explanation. Patrice, so a question came up. Will there be an opportunity for input for the TOD around the stations 130th and 145th?
So I am assuming that you're talking about specific development projects.
I think it's a general, I'm reading this as just a general question about more opportunity for community input as we move into the next phase, as we begin to talk about, as you go into 2022 and 2023.
Yeah.
And I heard you saying there would be specific, I think I heard you.
Yeah, so the next phase of work would be, we'll start doing the zoning and environmental studies. And so we'll have a couple of alternatives, and I think we have enough input through the planning process to kind of come up with a range of alternatives that we can talk about in the next phase of work. And then we'll be looking at the impacts of each of those alternatives. And also one of the alternatives would be what we usually call the no action alternative, meaning that, what would the impacts be if we didn't change the zoning? Because things will still get built, things will still get torn down, and things will still get built. There's still some opportunity for change in the neighborhood, even if there isn't any new zoning. And then we'll be comparing those alternatives. So we're going to be coming to the community about, are these the right alternatives to study? Should we be looking at a different alternative? So that's going to be one of the first big questions that come up. And through that process, people are going to want to know, well, what are these different zones? What does that mean? How tall are those buildings? So a lot of it will be sort of more education and just talking about the different kinds of zones that we have in Seattle and getting a better understanding of those, what it means in terms of the kinds of buildings that get built through that zone. And then after we have, and then again, we'll probably have some discussions around what we call a draft environmental impact statement, which is a big document that identifies all of the impacts of the different alternatives. And some alternatives may have more impacts on, let's say, natural resources than other alternatives. And some alternatives might have more impacts in terms of exposure to noise or air quality than some other alternatives. So we'll also have some conversations around those alternatives and which alternatives people like best, and how we can mitigate what we can do about some of those impacts. Maybe there's ways that we can build, or maybe there's some extra rules that we can include in the zoning that would eliminate some of those impacts. So that's going to be a very deep and kind of technical conversation that we'll have. And then we'll come up with what we call a preferred alternative, which would be one of those alternatives, or maybe a combination of those alternatives that then is the proposal that we would want to move forward with. And then there's opportunity for more community engagement, because once we kind of pass that proposal along to council, they conduct a whole process. They want to hear from you. So they're going to have a public hearing, or they might want to have some additional meetings. Your council member might want to have some community meetings to hear from you about that proposal. So there's going to be lots of opportunities for you to hear about, to weigh in on, to contribute to, before any sort of action is taken on new zoning. One thing that also makes this a little tricky is that at the same time, we're also updating our comprehensive plan. And so there may be policies that we have to change, or that we have to, or that we need to add in order to support our proposal. And so that's another process that you may be wanting to follow, is that bigger citywide, like, what do we do around our transit stations? And this one in particular, because it's not yet an urban village, so maybe it should be an urban village, and that's a designation that we make in our comprehensive plan as well. So lots of big questions to come up in this next phase of work.
And to clarify too, Patrice, who makes the final decision on what the zoning changes are? Is that Seattle City Council and the mayor?
Seattle City Council. So we make a proposal where the mayor will make a proposal to City Council, and then City Council reviews it, consults with the community, holds a formal public hearing, and then it's a committee will make a recommendation. It's the Land Use and Neighborhood, the LUN Committee, Land Use and Neighborhood Committee will review that proposal and make a recommendation to the full council, and then the full council will take a vote on it.
And I wanted, because I know that there's some questions that have come up in here, and I recognize we're going tight on time. I just wanted to get to this one piece I know is important, and a lot has been written about it, and it comes up a lot in the comments. It's my understanding that at least today, that the question of Jackson Park is separate from this discussion. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're not, at this point in time, it's not our intention to include any zoning changes for Jackson Park or North Acres for any parklands. So the zoning on those lands would not change.
Okay, thank you. And I also want to say that in addition to SDOT, for a future webcast, I'm also hoping that we can have someone from Parks come and talk about the parks in the neighborhood as well. So we can have a session specifically on that. I'm recognizing it's 8 o'clock and you guys are so gracious to join this call from your homes. There are additional questions. I'm going to share this with you guys. Patrice, you have an ongoing list of most asked questions that. And you're going to the extent that any of these are, you're going to, that strike you as needing to be added, you're going to revisit that and possibly answer questions there. And if anybody has questions that you just really feel you want to know, is it okay for folks to reach out to you guys individually to email you?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
And do either of you have any additional comments or closing comments that you'd like to make?
Again, yeah, there's a lot of information that's already been compiled. So, so again, if you're hungry for more details, I would refer you to the website, the draft plan, and also there is a section there on frequently asked questions. And I think that your neighbors have thought of a lot of the questions that you're thinking of now. So give those a look as well.
Perfect. Really, thank you both for all of the work you've done. Thank you for listening to all of us in our community. And it's really a pleasure. And I hope that you guys both have a great rest of your night.
Thanks for inviting me.
Great. Thanks, Renee. Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
And thank you everybody in the community who's joined. I really appreciate everybody participating.
Great.
Have a good night.
Thanks all.